Hey guys, Tommy here with TFL Classics and an interesting story time for you today surrounding our 1978 Subaru DL. This is a car we bought a few months ago as a project vehicle. Really cool car, four-wheel drive, super low original mileage, 52,000 miles, owned by an old lady for pretty much its entire life, spent pretty much its entire life here in Boulder, Colorado. But because it's here in Boulder, Colorado, and because our offices are here in Boulder, Colorado, we have to register it here and we have to take it through emissions. Dun dun dun. You see here in Colorado, several counties, not every county in the state, but several counties require you to emissions test your vehicle. Basically smog if you're out in California. And we've kind of funny rules about it. So vehicles 1976 through 1981 require a two-stage idle emissions test. Basically, you bring it to a facility, they stick a probe up the exhaust and then run the engine at an idle and then at another set RPM, and they just see how much crap it's polluting. And then vehicles 1981 and newer require a dyno test. So they put them on a dyno, they shift them through the gears, and they see how the vehicle would perform in the real world. Now this is a 1978, unfortunately, so it fits right in between the 76 and 81 requirement. If it was pre-76, we could get classic plates for it and never need an emissions test, but because it's that weird awkward zone, it needs to get one done. Now, here's where things get a little bit controversial. You have to bring your gas car to some place called Air Care Colorado to get it emissions tested. However, Air Care Colorado is its own private company, and it's a whole thing. And then diesel emissions in the state are even more complicated because individual private shops can diesel emission test vehicles. It's a whole thing. But anyways, I brought this vehicle in the middle of September to Air Care Colorado in Boulder, Colorado, so that I could get our full-sized real plates on it, get away from the temporary tags. Brought it in, and let me show you what happened. It failed. It failed everything. Well, that's not true. It passed the gas cap present, so it does have a gas cap, but pretty much all the tests they ran through it were no-go. So it failed the HCs, and it also failed COs well above its limit. So you can see HCs, hydrocarbons, limits 400. We were in the 900 range at idle, and then COs 6.5, and the limit was 1.5. So this is a pretty big fail. Now, this is where things get interesting because you can exempt a vehicle if you spend enough money toward emissions equipment and getting it fixed, but it's only a temporary exemption. And I think on a vehicle of this age, you'd be like $720 toward emissions-related equipment. If you pay a mechanic to do that, and they can be like, all right, well, you tried. But we wanted to do it right. We wanted to get this car to pass emissions and see what that process would be like. And it was very interesting because not a whole lot of shops are willing to work on ancient Subarus with limited part availability. Not a lot of shops have the knowledge that really needs to go into this vehicle in order to get it to pass emissions. So we brought it to the one place who thought that could help us, and take a look. It's actually the place that's listed on the back of this vehicle. Subaru Repair. There it is. It's a play on words. Subaru Repair. It's a service and sales place here in Boulder, Colorado. And the reason we brought it here is because for a period of several years, this shop actually owned this exact car. So we're like, well, these guys specialize in Subarus, and if anyone can help us fix this little car, it's going to be Subaru Repair. Now, Subaru Repair is an interesting shop because here in Boulder, Colorado, like every other car is a Subaru. You can't swing a duck around your head without hitting a Subaru, and therefore, Subaru Repair is an extremely busy independent shop here. I went to their facility, I walked through, they have like 10 bays. Every bay is jammed packed with cars waiting to get serviced or fixed or engine replaced. They have an entire room. I walked by it, there must have been 80 flat fours lined up on shelves. It was incredible. I've never seen more boxer engines. So these guys are like the go-to place to fix Subarus, but never use them, don't have any affiliation with them. Called them up, told them my issue, and they were a little hesitant at first because they don't really work a whole lot on these old carbureted Subarus anymore, but they had one guy who's been working there for 30 years who said he was up for the task. He was up for the challenge. And he would take a look at our little flat four and see if we can get this thing through emissions. Now, let me show you what he did. The guy was kind of a wizard, to be honest. He went well above and beyond what I would expect anyone to do to fix this poor little car, because You could tell he was really passionate about it. He was super incredibly knowledgeable, and he did pretty much everything in his power to make this thing pass. So the first thing they did was try to adjust the carburetor and get it to squeak through emissions. So they played with the fuel mixtures. They also went deep into the timing on the engine to see if they could get it to pass. And here were the results. Now, the gentleman was kind enough to actually take the car to the facility to get it retested, and it passed the HCs, but it failed the CO. So you can see HC requirements 400s. This was 73, 75. COs though fail, so still 2.66 above the limit of 1.5, and this still isn't good enough. Now this is where things get interesting, because he then went ahead and rebuilt the entire carburetor. So he pulled it off the engine. He went through everything, a full rebuild kit, and that didn't work. So he was still a tiny bit off meeting the CO requirements of 1.5. So he started really diving into it. He called a bunch of people, talked to experts within the carbureted Subaru field, and here is the absolutely mind-boggling part. Back in '78, emissions started to play a big role in vehicle design, right? It became a big issue. You started seeing the whole smog in California driving the way new cars were designed. So manufacturers in the late '70s, especially the Americans, were straddling their cars with charcoal canisters and air pumps and horribly inefficient catalytic converters that would rob power. Now Subaru back in the day, they didn't do that. They were able to design an engine that was small enough and efficient enough and clean enough where they didn't even put a catalytic converter on this engine from the factory. So underneath this air filter, there's a very complicated air injection system, but there was never, ever a catalytic converter on this car when it was brand new. And the craziest thing is, when this car was new 42 years ago, it couldn't have meeting the Colorado emissions requirements. It couldn't have. It was never designed to the standard that the state of Colorado thinks that 76 through 81 vehicles were intended to meet, which is just kind of crazy to me that the state expects me to re-engineer the car to do something that 42 years ago it couldn't even have done before it was, I don't know, what do people do in Subarus in Colorado? They smoke funny things and they drive to I don't know, trailheads wearing hemp suits. And even back then, it wouldn't have met it. So John he went crazy above and beyond. He not only rebuilt the carb, did the timing, brand new points in it. He messed with the mixture to see if he could get it to pass. And finally, he did one last-ditch effort, which was to run 3 gallons of E85 in the tank. And it just barely squeaked by. Let me show you the results. All right, you can see we got a pass. There you go, idle 1.4 under a limit of 1.5. That was a pass. This is this is the magic sheet that we need. Now, it was expensive to make this happen, and they said it would be expensive, and they were right. I mean, the total repair bill, $858 to get this thing to pass. But I mean, credit where credit's due. We don't have any affiliation with Subaru Repair. They really went above and beyond to make this happen. They put a lot of hours. They drove this car to the facility many, many times after tweaking things. And I was really impressed with their customer service. My service guy was calling me all the time, letting me know what he was doing. Probably one of the best experiences I've had with an independent shop of that scale, especially on making it happen. So if you have a Subaru in Boulder, definitely check them out. I mean, it was an expensive repair, and we certainly aren't getting any breaks for the YouTube channel. Not that I would expect that to happen in case the commenters out there are screaming at me. But yeah, the little car passed. We were able to get it to work with 3 gallons of ethanol in it. The upside of that big repair is with the carb rebuild and the tune-up, it's running beautifully. Like, it idles perfectly. It feels like it's got more power now. We're ready to shift it up the hills, and it's totally legal, of course. Now, so we got to bring it to our local DMV, hand them the magic piece of paper. They'll hand us our plates, and we'll be motoring down the road for another 5 years on classic plates before we have to go through the whole debacle again. What I would wish is, like, I wish that was a moving target. So I think that the classic car exemption should move up as time progresses throughout the era. So, back when I was registering my Lincoln 5 years ago, pre-76 was exempt. Now in 2020, it's still pre-76. That should be a moving target. And the reason is because old cars, they really don't get driven that much. This Subaru, even though it was polluting more than it should have, granted, it was meeting what it was designed to do at one point in 1978. It's unrealistic to expect a car to perform on a scale that it was never intended to do, especially given the fact that this car will never be driven. This is a classic 70s Subaru. This is like a take it out on Sundays to go get ice cream with your family thing. This is not the daily drivers. There's a lot of reasons that emission requirements need to exist. There's a lot of trucks out there with people that are blowing crazy amounts of coal into the earth. But this little Subaru, it's got a 1.6 liter. The engine's the size of my suitcase. It gets driven once every 3 weeks. I think that it's not the Exxon Valdez that the state is kind of implying it is by not meeting the emissions requirements set. Because it never could have. It never would have. But John over at Subaru Repair worked his magic, and now it does. Well, there's a quick story about the 78 Subaru. Check out TFL Car and TFLTruck.com because we got more coming with this little guy. Hopefully off-road. That'll be fun.